Okay, so tonight we're going to be learning Os Ayin in the Sefer Reish Millin from Rav Avram Yitzchak Kohen Cook, Schlusi Gan Aleinu. And like we said, really starting from Os Mem, which comes after the Os Lamed, Os Mem represents the second half of Sefer Reish Millin, where the transition from the infinitude of the Os Aleph transitions into the second stage of creation, which begins to have a relationship with otherness, which begins to have a relationship with human beings who are going to occupy the space of creation. From Os Mem and onwards, we're already dealing with things as they leave the realm of the infinite, still within the hand of God, Kavyachol, still within the hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as he's giving over this koach, this potential of being. Yet from Mem down to Taf, which are the Osios Mace, because it's dead in relationship to the Osios of Aleph to Lamed, which are Kel, which are a name of God. But Mem to Taf is the fallenness, is the beginning of actual separation. Like we saw by the Os Mem, it was the Klaliyut HaKol, it was the Chachma, and then the Nun were the Nunei Hayam, the fish that emerged in their particularity, in their individual pratiyut, from within the Klaliyut HaKol, from within the universality of everything. And the Os Samech, which we saw was associated with the Butzina, the Kardanusa, the paradoxical act of limitation that contains within itself a residual light of the infinite. So it's a limitation that doesn't actually impress any form of limitation, but it's the beginning stages of limitation. And now we arrive at the Ayin. Now the Ayin and the Pei, as we're going to see, are the beginning of human beings interacting, the Neshama interacting on a certain level with the Metzius, with the world that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has created for them. Now Ayin, the eye, vision, for Rav Kook, is fundamental. And one of the ramazim, one of the simanim to that is the fact that historically speaking, Rav Kook, Rav Avram Yitzchak Kohen Cook, Schlusi Gan Aleinu, has been referred to as Hara'aya, which can also be spelled out as Re'iyah. Because for Rav Kook, everything was a vision. Rav Kook had a vision of Kaliyut, Rav Kook had a vision of idealism. Now, that wasn't a given in his chug. In the chug Hara'aya, there was another student, the Nazir HaKadosh, Rav David Cohen, who wrote Kol HaNevuah, the voice of prophecy, and Rav David Cohen argued with his Rebbe on a certain level. He felt very connected to his Rebbe, but he argued with his Rebbe, and he didn't think that the ayin, he didn't think that vision or Re'iyah was the most significant sense in terms of spirituality and religious experience. He felt that it was the auditory experience, the Kol HaShemi, the sound of the experience of spirituality, and he wrote an entire sefer on it, a dissertation of sorts, Kol HaNevuah, a holy dissertation, where he goes through the beginning of Jewish philosophy as it's born out of its, out of the cage that the Greek Assyrians had placed it within. It's the emergence of this auditory nature of Jewish experience, to the point that even learning a Daf Gemara, or Aaron Lichtenstein, Zecher Tzadik Lebracha, writes in a review of Kol HaNevuah that I love the Sefer very much. I love the holiness of the Nazir very much. But according to him, anytime a Jew sits down and learns Daf Yomi, they're engaged in the prophetic experience. And the Nazir HaKadosh would have nodded his head and say, yeah, that's kind of what I'm trying to say. The Nazir felt that hearing, the auditory sense, was the most important sense in spirituality, but Rav Kook felt that it was vision. Now, either way we look at it, the ayin is going to be deeply related to vision. The ayin is going to be deeply related to the concept of seeing spirituality. Now, we're still not talking about a sensual seeing where we're actually perceiving anything, but it's still the neshama's perception, because again, only by Taf does the world actually manifest itself in the malchus, the asiya, in the lowest realms of creation. By the Os Ayin, we're still elevated from the material limitations of existence, yet it's already the experience or the preparatory stage where the neshama begins to see that which HaKadosh Baruch Hu has created. Now, two hakdamos are necessary in order to understand what Rav Kook is saying with regards to the Os Ayin. Both of these hakdamos, I can actually say, are nearly certainly actual influences on Rav Kook. We're going to be reading from the Ramchal, and we're going to be reading from Rav Yitzchak Isaac Chaver, the Talmud Muvhak of the Vilna Gaon in Kabbalah, at least, along with Rav Menachem Mendel Mishklav. Now, both of these sources, it's clear, and there's a lot of research done on it and wonderful articles that have been written on it recently about the influence that Rav Yitzchak Isaac Chaver had on Rav Kook in terms of Kabbalah. Again, Rav Kook, like we spoke about in the introduction, was a hybrid of sorts. He was an attempt to unify the zerem of Hasidus, the zerem of Kabbalah as seen through Chabad lens of the Alter Rebbe and the Mittler Rebbe, which came from his mother's side, as well as the Lithuanian Kabbalah that he experienced, A, by learning with the Leshem Shuvah Chaloma when he was a young rabbi, and B, from his father's side. So, like Rav Kook says in a certain letter, he says that the Achris Hayamim, at the end of days, Yafasi Chasan Shatamidei Hagra v'Tamidei HaBal Shem Tov, that the conversation between the Vilna Gaon and the conversation between the Baal Shem Tov at the end of days in the pre-Messianic era is going to be beneficial for the world. So it's very clear that he was influenced by Hasidus as well as Rav Yitzchak Isaac Chaver, and his relationship with the Ramchal, Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, is obvious to all, and the Nazir HaKadosh and Kol HaNevuah spends the last 10 pages or so of his Sefer basically explicating the fact that Rav Kook simply came to renew and enliven the project of the Ramchal. And the Nazir HaKadosh spent a lot of his time trying to show how Rav Kook's Kabbalah and Rav Kook's theosophy on a certain level was inspired by the Ramchal. Now, the first introduction we're going to look at from the Ramchal, I'm using the Sefer Das Tvunos, which is really the Ramchal's philosophical explanation of his mystical project. Again, one of the Sfarim that the Ramchal was forced to write because of the historical situatedness he found himself in. He wasn't allowed to speak Kabbalah explicitly. He wasn't allowed to write in Aramaic anymore. It was post-Sabbateanism, and there was a big hisnagdus against the Ramchal. Ramchal had his Sfarim burnt the same way Rav Kook, Sfusei Galeno, had his Sfarim burnt in Yerushalayim. Now, the Ramchal in Das Tvunos talks about an idea, and there could be 20 sources to quote from this, but we're going to be looking at the Lashon in Das Tvunos. The Ramchal describes two fundamental hanhagos, two modes of governance that HaKadosh Baruch Hu uses when engaging and interacting with creation and with humanity and with the Jewish people in particular. Now, these two hanhagos, these two modes of governance, are a binary split that can basically sum up everything from the beginning of history towards the end of history. Ramchal refers to these two hanhagos, these two modes of governance, as hanhagas hamishpat, the mode of judgment and justice, the hanhagas hayichud, and the mode or the method of unity. Now, hanhagas hamishpat for the Ramchal is going to be the mode of governance that HaKadosh Baruch Hu uses based on schar va'onesh, on good and bad, on tov v'ra, on permissible and not allowed, on good actions and negative actions, on schar va'onesh, on punishment and reward, on bechira, on the ability of the human being to engage in actual volitional avoda based on the apparent duplicity that reigns supreme in the realm of hanhagas hamishpat, in the realm of mishpat, where the person has bechira and the world appears to be devoid of a unifying factor. That is the hanhaga, that is the typical mode that HaKadosh Baruch Hu utilizes in this world to engage with history, to engage with reality, which really answers up the main, theodicy question that the Ramchal may have been dealing with, which is, why is there apparent evil in the world? And the answer is very simple. In order for there to be bechira, that's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to run the world according to hanhagas hamishpat. That's going to be, Kabbalistically speaking, associated with the partsuf of Zer Anpin, like we discussed in Osvav, the partsuf with which HaKadosh Baruch Hu engages in the world of schar va'onesh, tov v'ra, kosher and asur, kosher and pasul, the 6 different experiences that a person can engage in, of chol and Shabbos, of darkness and light. But the other hanhaga, the second hanhaga that HaKadosh Baruch Hu utilizes in order to run the world and ensure that the world arrives at its teleological end in the Messianic era and the advent of Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David and the 7th millennia and the 8th millennia, v'chule v'chule, the Ramchal speaks about the Hanhagas HaYichud. Hanhagas HaYichud is basically the autopilot that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has placed within the world that ensures that in spite of the fact that human beings function in the realm of good and bad and mishpat, nevertheless, history is ensured to arrive at its teleological and intended point, because underneath the bechira and underneath the apparent duplicity, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is tamid engaged in a unification and a unity of the world itself. that Hanhagas HaYichud is where HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, in spite of the fact that there is Bechira and Tovara and Hester and He'elem and negativity for the sake of Bechira, nevertheless, underneath it all, there is a Hanhagas HaYichud, there is a unity that ensures that every part of existence, even that which appears to be fundamentally removed from or and good, and appears to be negative and ra and terrible, both on a klaliyut level and on a particular level in our daily lives. Hanhagas HaYichud is the mode of governance with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not mitzamsim himself, where Hashem says, I am going to release my full power. I am going to show that the world is nothing but my plaything. Now, the Ramchal shows how history is a battle, if you will, between Hanhagas HaMishpat and Hanhagas HaYichud, or the parts of Zer Anpin, the small face, and the parts of Arich Anpin, the long face, which is associated with Hanhagas HaYichud. Now, it's important for us to understand, and Rav Kook is going to make this very clear, that although it appears that these two modes of governance, of Zer Anpin and Arich Anpin, of the small countenance, the small face, which is representative of negativity and anger, and the elongated face, which is representative of rachamim and mercy and a vision beyond Tov and Ra, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks at the Jewish people and says, in spite of the fact that you're guilty according to Mishpat, I'm going to look at you from a lens of rachamim rabim, like Rabbi Nachman speaks about so often. Although these appear to be duplicitous, and although these appear to be binary modes of engagement, in truth, both are operating perpetually at the same time. It's not that there's Hanhagas HaMishpat and then all of the destruction and negativity arises out of Hanhagas HaMishpat and then eventually Hashem will reveal Hanhagas HaYichud, but rather, simultaneously speaking, within Hanhagas HaMishpat, within that which appears to be the mundane functionality of a world that is split up between good and bad, underneath it all, in the interiority of it all, there exists a yichud, a unity, which is pregnant and latent within all of history, which stands to be revealed in the future. So that's going to be the introduction for the Ramchal in Das Tfunos. And the second hakdama that I want to look at is from the Beis Olamim, which is Rav Yitzchak Isaac Chaver's Perush on the Idra Rabbah. Now, Rav Yitzchak Isaac Chaver, again, was a very lengthy author. He wrote multiple Kabbalistic Svarim. He wrote Afike Mayim. He wrote Pisvei Sha'arim, which is a very important hakdama to the Arizal and Eitz Chaim. Beis Olamim is a perush on Idra Rabbah. Beis Olamim is a perush on one of the more fundamental aspects of the Zohar HaKadosh. Now, in the Idra Rabbah, there's a lashon, and the same is true with regards to the Idra Zuta. There are tikkunim, there are rectifications, there are modes of governance that come from whatever this means, klapei us, from the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Anthropomorphically speaking, there are certain tikkunim. There's the chotem of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's the meitzach of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's the peh of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's the oznaim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and all of these orifices, all of these tikkunim represent different modes of engagement within existence and within the world. Now, the Idra Rabbah goes at length to discuss the tikkunim of the einayim. And there's an interesting stira that Rav Yitzchak Isaac Chaver brings out. And I'm going to read it out loud. And he says, Hakushya pshuta. There's a very simple question. Shanirim haksuvim soitrim. There seems to be a contradiction within the psukim. V'chein hikshu b'medrash. And the medrash also asks this question. Shalapa'amim omer ayin Hashem. Most of the time, the psukim say the eye of God. Shehu chad ena, which is one eye. Ulapa'amim omer ene Hashem shehem beis einayim. And at other times, the psukim say that there are two eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ulazem metaretz, and the Idra Rabbah comes to answer over here. Loi kasha, it's not a kasha. Why? Because hab is Zer Anpin. When the pasuk says there are two eyes, two ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to look at the world, good and bad, light and darkness, tov and ra, schus and chova, bechira and yediyah, schar va'onesh, the duality of being, the binary oppositions of things, two eyes, two ways of looking at things. So lo kasha, that's talking about Zer Anpin. That's talking about Hanhagas HaMishpat, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world under the guise of schar va'onesh. And when it talks about ayin echas, when it talks about one eye of unity, Ba'arach Anpin, that's Arach Anpin, which is the Hanhaga of Yichud, where everything is unified and everything is moving towards the same purpose. Sheba Atika Kadisha. Hu Chad Eina. In Atika Kadisha and Arach Anpin, it's only one eye. And he goes on to say at length that Hanhagas HaMishpat, is going to be two eyes. When we talk about the Einayim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that when Hashem looks at the world and when a person looks at the world, on a certain level, there's always a duplicity at play. There's always two ways of looking at things, good and bad. And anytime we disclose any good, there's also a secondary level of bad that can negate the good. Or schar is mediated by onesh, or yediyah, or the foreknowledge of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which negates our own volitional actions, is negated by the bechira. That's going to be the duplicitous and binary mode of Hanhagas HaMishpat, of the two eyes of Zer Anpin. But there's also a level of Hanhagas HaYichud, of the one eye, the singular eye, the unitary eye, which sees everything in the light of the true nature of existence, which is the Hanhagas HaYichud, which is the Hanhaga of Arech Anpin, the Yud Gimel Midos of Rachamim, the Hashem Kel Rachum V'chanan, the fact that even though it appears that there is a Hashem before the Chet and a Hashem after the Chet, in reality they're both rooted in the same unification, in the same Hanhagas HaYichud of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now with that introduction, with the fact that there are two modes of governance that HaKadosh Baruch Hu uses to engage in the world, and secondly, that these two modes of governance are represented in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kaviyachol, that there can be a dual mode of vision, of good and bad, of seeing things in a negative way or a positive way, a light way or a dark way, and underneath that duplicitous mode of vision, which appears to make the world a separate and fragmented existence, there's the singular eye, there's the singular vision, which sees everything in its klaliyut, in its universality, and recognizes that both good and bad, both tov and ra, both kosher and usher, both schar and onesh, both yediyah and bechira, are contained within the fundamental unity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which remains unfeasible and irrational until the coming of Mashiach and until the disclosure of Yichud itself. Now on to the words of Rav Kook. And I think in Os Ayin, Rav Kook is more specific in each word than I've seen in some of the other letters, that each word really demands an explication and an understanding that would take much longer than we actually have. Rav Kook says as follows. He says, Hatsiurim v'hamusagim, the images or the depictions and the musagim and the topics and the concepts, acharei hasgaram b'tchumam v'chugam, after their enclosure within their boundaries and their circle, acharei hasmacham b'smicha chazaka b'gvulei muhutam, after their support within the limits and the boundaries of their essence, Motziim es oz havhakas oram elapoel. After the limitation, they allow their light and their vision and their essential light that is contained within them to manifest into actuality. So Rav Kook here is very clearly connecting the Os Ayin to the Os Samach that preceded it. In Os Samach, we saw the smichat ha-mitziyut. We saw the limitation and the boundedness of creation and the measure and the limiting nature and the din and the gvul and the gvura, which says ad kan tavo, not to let one thing melt into the other, but rather to allow each thing to reify itself in a fundamental individualized pratiyut, so that each thing remains separate from its other, which was the ostensible gvura that HaKadosh Baruch Hu placed into the world, which is the birthplace of din and separation, yet at the same point allows for creation to play itself out, that only after the samach, only after the limitation of creation, can mitzius, can particular existence, allow their light to emerge so that human beings can engage with them. Now, I'm not going to read it inside, but this is remarkably close to something Rabbi Nachman says in Torah Ayin Vav in Likutei Moharan, as well as in Torah Yud Gimel Os Daled, where he describes the nature of vision. And for Rabbi Nachman, vision was a fundamental mode of experience, and there are multiple Torahs and ideas regarding vision and seeing things properly and seeing the person's self properly. But Rabbi Nachman describes that Hari'iyah osa kli, that vision makes a vessel, that seeing something allows us to actually measure it. Before it's seen in a certain solipsistic type of philosophical outlook, before something is seen, it is devoid of measure, it is devoid of particularity, it is devoid of gevura, it is devoid of the measurements that allow it to become a thing. Only when I actually look at something in a very Kantian way, and Rav Yitzchak Eitzelchaver quotes Immanuel Kant actually in a number of his svarim, so we see that his philosophical outlook finds its place within the Kabbalistic view of Rav Kook and Rav Yitzchak Eitzelchaver v'chulei. But only when we see something, only when we perceive something through our own vision, through our own ocular mode of engagement, do we minimize things and do we place things within time and measurement. So vision itself is what allows us to engage with things. Prior to being seen, the thing exists in a certain infinitude, devoid of time and space, and vision allows it to form into a particularized essence. And Rav Kook is going to say this explicitly. He says, only after the limitation, only after their minimalization and their limitation within the Gvulim, can their light actually emerge? Can the light of particular existence actually emerge? Az ha'ayin haroa yotze'es me machovo. Only then does the seeing eye emerge from within its hiding place. The ha're'iyah b'chol gvaneha, and vision in all of its different hues and all of its different colors, matchila lepoyel es pu'ulasa. Only after the limitation that allows for there to be an emergence and a formation of particularized and individualized and separate existence, only then can vision actually begin to act, where we see something and we engage with it and we try and understand it. Now Rav Kook is going to describe the fact that the Os Ayin for Rav Kook is going to be a bottom boundary. I forgot to print out a picture of it. It's going to be a bottom boundary, and then the two lines that jut out of that bottom boundary are going to be a Zayin on the one hand and a Vav on the other hand. And this is according to the Beis Yosef, according to various Rishonim, with regards to how the Os has to look. Rav Kook here is going to describe the simple fact that the Ayin, vision, the letter that represents vision, always contains with it a binary of modalities. The Zayin, which, if we remember correctly, represents the Zayinei HaMilchama, the weapons that are necessary to wage the battles against negativity of the Machatzte Chakla, of the threshers of the fields who come to engage in Kedusha and Ruchnias. And on the other side, there's going to be the Vav, which is the Meshach HaChaim, the drawing forth of life, the Vavei HaChibor, the Vavei HaEmudim, which show us the connectivity between one thing and the other. So the Ayin is always already going to be in this binary mode of opposition between the need to fight against negativity on the one hand of the Zayin Milchama, and on the other hand, the Vav, which is representative of the drawing down of life, of a positive vision. And the eye itself contains both capacities because, again, the eye can operate on two levels. It can operate on the level of duplicity, which sees good and bad and darkness and light, or it can operate on the loftier level of the eye, the Ayin Echad of Arich Anpin, the one eye which sees unity. Here Rav Kook is saying that the Ayin, at least at its beginning stages of vision, always engages with the broken duplicitous nature of existence itself, the Zayin and the Vav that make up the Ayin. And Rav Kook continues and he says, Ha're'iyah b'chol baneha matchila lepoyel es kulasa, shetef ha'chayim asher b'havav, the drawing down of life that is representative of the Vav, and Oz ha'hagana v'koach ha'kerev asher b'hazayin, and the strength of protection and the strength of war and battle that is representative of the Zayin. And here Rav Kook is saying, Einam mitchabrim po b'shorashim ha'idiyali ha'machshavti, rak b'basis ha'ma'asi ha'magmati. And here Rav Kook is telling us that the Vav and the Zayin, these two oppositional trends of seeing negativity in the world and needing to fight against it, and seeing positivity in the world and needing to draw it down, those are not unified at their source here in their ideal level. We're not talking about the Ayin of Arich Anpin. We're not talking about the singular eye of Hanhagas HaYichud yet. We're still talking about the duplicitous mode of vision, which sees binary oppositions in the world, which sees good and bad, which sees darkness and light, which sees schus and chova. And here, they're not unified in their ideal sense, but rather at the basis hatachtati, that the Zayin and the Vav only connect at their bottom fundamental manifestation within existence, which Rav Kook is using to show us that there's a need for both modes of functionality within the world, the Zayin of negativity and the Vav of positivity. They're not unified here in their ideal sense of Arich Anpin, where they become one eye of the Hanhagas HaYichud, but rather they need to manifest within the duplicitous and double nature of the eyes of Hanhagas HaMishpat. And Rav Kook continues and he says something amazing. He says, Hashlila shehi zoyre eskol hahashpos hachitzonius eskol hahofaot hamishpashtosh es habira hamifurat shel hanoisim haritzonim hasichliim b'chol diuke ofim b'yasod zayin u'milcham mitzad echad. But on the one hand, the Zayin is representative of the negation that the eye is is engaged in the world, of looking at that which we're not supposed to look at and saying that this is not for me, looking at the negativity of the world and pushing it away, looking at the fallenness of our Ratzon and our Maisim, and recognizing the brokenness of it all, yet at the same point fighting against it with the Zayin HaMelchama, the recognition of the fallenness of creation, the fallingness of existence, and the need to say things are pessimistic, things are negative. It's a koyach hashlila, and the Zayin HaMelchama serve to push it away. Umitzad hasheni, and from the second side, ha'afna hachiyuvit shel hametzius v'hayeshut, the positive assertions that we make and the affirmative statements that we engage in when we look at the world, and in spite of the fact that it appears negative, in spite of the fact of the brokenness and the need for weapons and the military opposition against the negativity in our lives, the right eye still sees and says things are positive. It's Baruch Sha'amar V'haya Olam, like Rav Shagar says in the name of Rav Kook, and Rav Kook says in Olas Ra'ayah, that Baruch Sha'amar V'haya Olam is an affirmation. It's a saying yes to the world. It's looking at the world, and in spite of the drive towards pessimism, in spite of the drive towards shlilat hakol, the negation of everything that's associated with the Zayin, we still say yes to the world. We have a re'iyah chiyuvit. We still decide and choose to say yes to the world and see positive within the world. The Einayim represent these two modes of vision. In the Hanhagas HaMishpat, there are always two ways of looking at things. There's the shlut, the negative, pessimistic outlook, and the chiyuvit, and the positive affirmation of the world, of Baruch Sha'amar V'haya Olam, of blessed is he who spoke and made the world, that in spite of historical failures and in spite of the darkness that abounds within the world, there's still an affirmative gesture, an affirmative utterance, which is saying yes to the world through the right eye of vision, which is in opposition to the left eye of vision. Both of them find support for their legs in the limitation and the boundary on the bottom side, at the bottom of the ayin. To prevent the darkness from arising, to prevent the full descent into negativity, to prevent us from falling deeply into the abyss, the abyss of chaos and destruction, into the abyss of separateness and scatteredness of kiyut. And over here of Kook it's an amazing word, but avak means dust, and the dustiness, if you will, of the world, the scattered nature of the avak haporeach that scatters into a million pieces of nothingness. Rav Kook here is saying that the duplicitous vision, the Hanhagas HaMishpat, the Schar Va'onesh, the good and bad, the Tov Ra, the Choshech and Or, the Chova and the Schus, the negative side of history and the positive side of history, those two fundamental modes of engagement, as long as we're still functioning within the Hanhagas HaMishpat that the Ramchal spoke about, they need that basis hatachtiti, they need that fundamental blockage to prevent them from falling down into the depths of tohu and despair. Because Rav Kook understood very well that if a person is operating according to the duplicitous vision of Hanhagas HaMishpat, it's all too easy to fall into kilyon. It's all too easy to fall into tohu. All a person has to do is read the diaries and the personal pinchasim of Rav Kook, especially Chadarav, to understand that simultaneous to his joy and spiritual ecstatic states, there was a merirut, a holy brokenness, a holy shverkeit and sabrachenkeit, as the Mittler Rebbe would say, and Rav Paratcher would say, a holy brokenkeit and a tornness that he refers to about himself in his autobiographical writings that is present. Rav Kook was not removing his vision from the negativity in the world through his idealism. Rather, his idealism was suffused with the recognition of the negativity, which is why his idealistic outlook still exists nowadays, which is why it means anything nowadays. It doesn't negate the negativity. It rather makes room for the negativity and says, okay, we're still going to deal with this, but we're still going to see things positively. The Zayin and the Vav, the Shlilut and the Chiyuvit, the negativity and the positivity, the positive outlook of Or and the negative outlook of Choshech, both of those need to be supported by the Basis HaTachtiti in order to ensure that they don't descend into the realms of chaos and destruction. Here, Rav Kook is now going to hint to us about the Hanhagas HaYichud, about the singular eye of Erech Anpin, and how it attaches itself to the duplicitous vision and the dual modes of seeing that are associated with the Schar and Onesh of Hanhagas HaMishpat and Zer Anpin. Rav Kook says as follows. He says, Heim Heim HaGorman, The limitation of existence, the formation of existence as it descends out of the universality of the Os Mem into the particularity of the Os Nun, and finally at the resting place and the Gvul of the Os Samech, that is that which causes as hofa'as hakoach ha'ayin l'seis l'pu'ula, vision to emerge and actually engage in practical engagement. The ha'ri'iyah ha'klalit, and the generalized vision here is going to be representative of the hanhagas hayichud, the ayin echad, the one eye, the ayin Hashem, which sees everything in spite of its duplicitous nature, in spite of its opposition to one another. HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees everything in its unity. This universal vision, this Re'iyah HaKlalit, the singular eye which sees everything and sees no bad in the world, the Tov Roi of David HaMelech, who was capable of looking at things that seemed Ra and revealing that they were really good, as HaKol Hiroa, it sees everything. It sees the Hanhagas HaMishpat and the Hanhagas HaYichud. It sees the good and the bad. It sees the suffering and the joys. Kel Roi, like the pasuk says in Bereshis after the birth of Yishmael, that Avram Avinu says, Kel Roi, the God of my vision, that God is associated with this universal vision of singular seeing, which contains opposites within itself. Hakol Mutzak, Hakol B'diyuk. Everything is measured and everything is specific. That which appears to be outside of the realm of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and that which appears to be within the realm of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, both of them are specific and essential within the Hanhagas HaYichud, within the universality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. B'chol ha'amada v'chativiyut, in all of its standing, in all of its collective nature, that the Tov and the Ra, the Vav and the Zayin need to fight against the world, and the ability to say the world is good, both of them form together in the unity of Hanhagas HaYichud. Lo tasig yad hakilyon mechached es hariyah. The hand of destruction, of practicality, is not strong enough to destroy hariyah, the vision. And here I want to say that Rav Kook was mitnaveh, Rav Kook had Ruach HaKodesh, because he's referring to himself that Yad HaKilyon is not able l'chached es hariyah. It can't destroy the vision, but we can also see that as lo l'chached es harayah. But the hand of destruction, of practicality, cannot destroy the vision of Ra'ayah, Rav Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Kook. HaBihira HaKoleles, the shining and collective vision of Hanhagas HaYichud that contains everything within it. Shachol HaPratim Ba'chayim Chayim Esanim B'notitzim Ba'osher B'hikusam. That everything that is contained within that vision, the good and the bad, the Vav and the Zayin, the Choshech and the Or, the Mishpat and the Yichud, the Schar and the Onesh, the Bechira and the Yediyah, the Chova and the Schus, the negativity and the positivity, the pessimism and the optimism, all of those are contained within the unified vision of the Ayin Haroa, the Ayin Hashem of Arach Anpin, of Asika Kadisha, which stands and is primed to be disclosed through the Or HaTzadik, through Yosef Avinu, from Yosef HaTzadik, who we say that Yosef HaTzadik was not afraid of Ayin Hara, like Rabbi Yochanan, who wasn't afraid of being handsome, because Ana Dizabati Yosef Ka'atina, the Ena Shata Ba'ena Bisha, that I am from the descendants of Yosef HaTzadik, who was above and beyond the eyes of seeing bad, who only operated according to a vision of good, who was able to see the good and the bad and say, everything is good, everything is part of the Yichud of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And to end very quickly, and two students, one student and one friend of Rav Kook, Rav Yitzchak Hutner and the Chazon Ish, Rav Yitzchak Hutner quotes this in Purim, and he says that Ra'isi v'pinkas echad may bal yisurin echad. I saw this in the notebook of somebody who suffered, and what he was referring to was the Chazon Ish, who suffered greatly in the Chazon Ish, and one of his igros, when talking about the Gemara in Pesachim, which states that nowadays we still operate according to the Hanagas of Mishpat, of duality, of duplicity. So we say Hatov Ha'metiv on good news and Baruch Dayan Emes on bad news. But in the future, when there's a revelation of unity, all there's going to be is Baruch Hatov Ha'metiv. And the Gemara asks, and nowadays is it not one? It is one. It's the Yichud of Hashem. And the Gemara continues and says, it is one, but we still have to make a bracha on both. Now, the Chazon Ish has a lashon where he says, Ein shum tsar, lemisha makiras or ha'oros. There is no pain, there is no suffering to the one who recognizes the light of lights. And the way Rav Hutner explains this, and I believe that he received this from Rav Kook, he famously said that without Rav Kook, you would be missing half of his spiritual presence, that there are two ors in the world, there are two lights, there are two modes of vision in the world, of ocular-centric experience, of the primacy of vision. There's the or of Hatov HaMetiv and the or of Baruch Dayan Emes. Somebody who recognizes the unity of those two oros and recognizes that both oros are contained within the unified light of Or HaOros, of the Ayin of Arach Anpin, doesn't experience Sar, recognizes that everything is unified. Next week, Bezos Hashem, we're going to see how the ayin leads to the peh and how vision allows us to emerge within language. And then, towards the end of the Aleph base, all of the letters are going to be engaged with the human being's exposure and experience with the creation that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has created.